Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Our next session, Navigating the HDP and Global Efforts, approaches best practices and strategies. To moderate this session, please welcome Ms. Sarah Poole.
Dear Excellencies, esteemed guests and partners, welcome to this important session on navigating the humanitarian development and peace nexus. My name is Sarah Poole, and I'm currently serving as United Nations Development Program Special Representative in Palestine, and I very much have the honor today to be your moderator of this session. At the outset, allow me to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and KS Relief for their vision to convene this timely and I would say critical fourth humanitarian forum. And our thanks and appreciation for providing also the opportunity to come together to reflect on the humanitarian development peace nexus in recognition of the imperative for a stronger, a more impactful, and a more effective joint efforts and partnerships, bringing together humanitarian response, recovery and development, and peace building towards what we will hope in countries around the world that are affected so desperately by crisis for a more hopeful, a more dignified, and a more peaceful future, especially for the most vulnerable. Increasingly, as we've heard over the past 2 days of this forum, as crises become even more protracted and more cyclical, we are all keenly aware that life-saving assistance and peace interventions are imperative, but also that they absolutely must be accompanied by approaches that bring together recovery and eventually reconstruction and development for the sustainability and for the peace that the individuals, the communities, and the countries deserve. It is my pleasure at the outset of this session to be introducing the first keynote speaker, His Excellency Mr. Sultan Al Marshad, the Chief Executive Officer of the Saudi Fund for Development. Your Excellency.
Bismillah wa salam ala Rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Your Excellency, distinguished delegation, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to be here with you today representing the Saudi Fund for Development and to join this important session on the Humanitarian Development and Peace HDP Nexus, a framework that can change the way we respond to crisis, conflict, and long-term challenges. I would like today, the world today is facing complex and ongoing crises, armed conflict, pandemic, forced displacement, and natural disaster. Traditional approaches that separate humanitarian aid, development, and peace efforts are no longer enough. The HDP Nexus reminds us that these three areas must work together to create long-lasting solutions. At SFD, we have seen the importance of this approach in many countries, such as Jordan and Afghanistan. By integrating humanitarian development and peace efforts, we can create a bigger impact and help communities recover faster. That is why SFD actively participates in a global discussion to address HDP challenges, prevent crisis, and supporting the stability of fragile states. Due to the urgent need for the proactive and interested approach with the international partners, I am pleased to announce that today we will sign a grant agreement with the UNDP to drill wells in rural areas of Somalia, with funding of $2 million US. This project will provide clean water to communities in need, helping improve lives and building resilience. Your Excellencies, implementing the HDP nexus is not without challenges. The fast-changing global landscape, especially in our region, request us to act in a more collaborating and flexible way. To succeed, we must strengthen cooperation between humanitarian, development, and peace actors, ensuring funding is flexible so resources can be adjusted as crises evolve. Work closely with local communities as partners, not just beneficiaries. Finally, the HDP nexus is not just a theoretical framework, it is a necessity. If we want to build a world where crises are not endless and suffering is not avoidable, we must embrace an approach that integrates proactive action, relief, recovery, and resilience. By working together across sector, we can break the cycle of crisis and create a more peaceful and sustainable future for the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for those keynote remarks and really reminding us on the necessity of bringing together collaboration and partnerships for relief and recovery, really necessary to end suffering. I am now delighted to invite our second keynote speaker, the UN Undersecretary General and UNDP Associate Administrator, Mr. Haliang Zhu, to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Excellencies, distinguished guests, and colleagues, it is an honor to join you in Riyadh. I extend my sincere gratitude to our host, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for being a steadfast champion of the humanitarian actions around the globe, and also for the championing of humanitarian development and peace nexus. We are gathered today at a moment in history marked by an intensifying climate emergency, escalating conflicts, and economic instability, political polarization, and rapid technological change. These challenges unfold against a backdrop of stagnating and backsliding official development assistance, slow progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, and escalating humanitarian needs. In the face of these overwhelming pressures, fragility, however, is deepening. In 2025, 2.1 billion people around the world, 1/4 of the world's population, are living in fragile and conflict-affected contexts. They account for 72% of the world's extreme poor. UNDP's experience working together with partners in the UN system and outside the UN, in places like Gaza, Ukraine, Yemen, Syria, Sudan, Somalia, and Afghanistan, reveals the same devastating pattern, the same truth. Crises wipe out years of hard-won development gains, pushing communities deeper into poverty and aid dependency. In the occupied Palestinian territory, for example, as of October 2024, the estimates by UNDP and the UN ESCWA have shown that by that time, the socio-economic impact of the war in Gaza has caused the loss of human development by 70 years. So this is a devastating figure that highlights both the realities of humanitarian and development emergencies. Today, nearly half of our expenditures are designated to supporting fragile and conflict-affected regions. In the 2023-2024 period, we responded to 44 crises, our highest level in recent history. And in most of these countries, UNDP and our development partners have been present for decades, supporting the capacities of local and national institutions before, during, and after this crisis. Crisis need not define the future of the communities affected. With an HDP approach, investments in early recovery and development can transform adversity into opportunity. What crisis has shown to us is that humanitarian support and life-saving measures is still vital, especially for vulnerable communities devastated by the impact of conflicts. However, humanitarian aid alone is not enough to enable communities and the countries emerge from crisis in a way that is sustainable, or that creates a path towards dignity and hope for the future. Early recovery is at the heart of the HDP nexus and is essential to reducing dependency on humanitarian assistance and fostering self-reliance. We see that time and time again, working with the partners, early recovery interventions play a critical role to support and complement humanitarian responses while keeping a forward-looking perspective on longer-term recovery, resilience, and reconstruction, and a broader perspective for peace. We have known that through lessons learned and experiences from crises around the world, humanitarian development and peace efforts will have most effect when they move simultaneously, not sequentially. This may entail, for example, that humanitarian and development partners working together to support critical services, including energy, water, health, and education, for the vulnerable population through a lens of immediate life-saving approaches and the rehabilitation of critical infrastructure. To foster and providing support to local actors, including municipal authorities, communities, civil society organizations, and the private sector, to sustain and support capacities that are essential to provide the services to community that should be an important element for recovery process through a lens of context and conflict sensitivity. That also includes identifying opportunities for emergency employment, cash for work, and support to micro and small enterprises to enable people to regain access to jobs, to dignity, and a prospect for the future, and reduce the reliance on humanitarian support. And finally, humanitarian development and peace actors can work together to ensure that the most vulnerable, typically left behind as part of both the humanitarian and the recovery and the response, they contribute to these efforts. And typically, again, with decades of presence, partnerships, and experiences in countries affected by conflicts. Right? And in this context, development actors can really work together to provide the support to national planning and the reform process, national ownerships, and the multi-sectoral coordination in policies, programs, and budgeting. Right? I think that's what we can do with the development DNA, right, to support the humanitarian action and move towards recovery and reconstruction faster. But for the HDP solutions to be applied at the pace and the scale needed, we must find better ways to leverage both short-term funding and the long-term predictable financing. And this year, UNDP, with the support of Germany, launched the innovative Nexus funding facility to address protected crisis in the Lake Chad Basin by fostering coordinated and multidimensional response and financing. And Mr. Kula will talk more about this in the panel, I understand. So very quickly, on the issue of forced displacement, which is another defining crisis of our times, where investing in HDP approaches is not just the right thing to do, it is a smart thing to do. Though forced displacement uproots lives, the resilience of human spirit can turn adversity into a journey of strength, hope, and new beginnings. By embracing HDP Nexus through government-led, development-driven solutions, we can help build resilient, thriving communities for the future. That applies to both the people on the move and also the host communities. Since 2022, we have worked with partners to help more than 19 million displaced people, returnees, and host communities to regain livelihoods, access justice, and restore essential services in places like Somalia, for which we are grateful for the Saudi Fund for Development for their support, in places like Sudan, Ethiopia, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Right? So we can do it. In the past 5 years alone, we have worked with our donors, our partners, to invest over $3 billion in development programs benefiting internally displaced persons, refugees, and the displacement-affected communities. So we can do this if we work together. To close, right, the crises we face are deeply interconnected, requiring coordinated strategies, investments, and our solutions must also be coordinated. Before this conversation, right, we invited our colleagues, OCHA, which is a co-organizer of this of the Humanitarian Forum, to join this session. But unfortunately, the panelists cannot join this discussion. So I had a conversation with Mr. Tom Fletcher, the Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Coordination of the UN. And we talked about the importance of working together, and also in a coordinated way, right, to jointly to use the limited resources most effectively. And we share a lot of points in common. So let us work together to operationalize and finance our HDP commitments on the ground, ensuring that our investments today reduce risks, strengthen stability, and build a better future for those in greatest need tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Zhu, for that keynote address, and really, again, that strong reminder that working in collaboration, in coordination, HDP partners can work in hand, do work in hand to reduce suffering, find solutions, and to lead towards opportunities for peace and sustainable development going forward. It is now my pleasure to introduce a segment of this session during which there will be a signing of an agreement for Somalia, as you have heard. And I would like to invite to the stage the Saudi Fund for Development, His Excellency Mr. Sultan Al Marshad. Mr. Haliang Zhu, UNDP Associate Administrator. His Excellency Ambassador Awais Haji Yusuf, the Ambassador of Somalia to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And Ms. Nahid Hussein, the UNDP Resident Representative to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And as we heard during the keynote speeches, this is really an important taking the words around the HDP nexus into action and also to financing bringing together a lens of humanitarian needs, but also recovery and development with a longer-term perspective, also of reducing local tensions over scarce resources, an essential element of peace building. The signing will proceed. It is now my pleasure to invite to the stage the esteemed panelists that will be joining us to take forward this discussion on the HDP nexus, and really, as the session is framed, to bring together different perspectives, different experiences, and different lessons learned that really form the basis of this collaboration that we have been discussing to take forward that notion of collaboration for a view of humanitarian development and peace. It is my honor to welcome to the stage first Ms. Ana Claudia Rosbach, the Executive Director of UN Habitat. His Excellency Engineer Faisal Al-Khatani, the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of the Saudi Fund for Development. Ambassador David Fernandez Poyana, the Ambassador and Permanent Observer of the United Nations University for Peace. Mr. Pitt Kohler, the Head of Division for the Humanitarian Assistance, the German Federal Foreign Office. And Mr. Andrew Severton, the Deputy Executive Director of Management for UNFPA. Thank you. At the outset, let me again welcome, but really thank all of the panelists. And I think all of us are looking forward to hearing your specific perspective, your specific experience on elements that really contribute to the HDP nexus, whether it's issues around displacement, issues around financing mechanisms, issues around vulnerabilities, including vulnerable youth or women. And we will be bringing this discussion together first from your perspectives. I don't like to use the word theoretical because I don't think we're theoreticians. We do come in as practitioners very much with the experience that we all have from the different experience that we have professionally, but also within our organizations across the spectrum of the HDP nexus. So I will be starting first with Ms. Rosbach from UN Habitat. And as also we've heard in the keynote speeches, and as I think all of us know, working in a community that's been affected by a crisis context, especially in an urban context, really requires almost an area-based development approach that brings in a more holistic approach that can integrate the humanitarian aspects, but also the development and also the peace nexus in that urban context, really to help support community resilience in those fragile settings. So if you can share with us, and I think UN Habitat is really the best place to speak to this, how do you see the role of urban planning playing in addressing the issues around internally displaced persons, especially in a protracted context, and experiences that you may have in long-term solutions for conflict-affected regions?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for the host, the foundation, but also the country. It's my first time here, and it's very critical to come here to this conference and to talk about this subject. And I'm glad that you started mentioning practitioners and versus theory, because I was just commenting with the colleagues before entering the panel. I do think that the nexus is a terminology that we understand, the few of us, but it's not what's in the heads of people, the people we work with, the communities we work with. In their heads, the only thing they want is to improve their lives, to live well and to have some minimum, at least, standards of quality of life. And it's very important that we get that, because they don't see life fragmented. First I need humanitarian help, and then I need development, and first I need this agency, and then agency A, B, C. That's no understanding as such, right? So it's our job to create a strong narrative of the value added of the different organizations, and it's our job to coordinate and to come together. In relation to UN Habitat, and you mentioned urban planning, but I would like to maybe utilize another terminology and talk about urban development, talk about building communities, talk about building cities. Because the way I understand the role of UN Habitat is related to our presence on the ground. In many of these places, we have been present all the time, throughout the time. So we do have teams, and some of them are here with us today, that are very familiar with the context. And in being familiar with the context, they are better prepared and able to engage with the stakeholders. And for me, this is the key added value. In a situation that is fragile, in a situation of conflict, in a situation of internal displacement, where we are dealing with very precarious conditions, and communities that lost everything they had, understanding, how the context can be improved in order to offer them better lives. For example, let's talk about host communities. Many people move from one place to the other, and they usually move closer to cities. Why? Because cities can offer jobs, because cities can offer education, because cities can offer opportunities. And the cities are not prepared for that. So if we are there, if we understand the stakeholders, if we understand the context, we can support this better integration, right? And why urban planning, why urban development? Because this is the channel, this is the backbone of how these communities will be better integrated, better connected, how this population is going to access services, get to the health unit, get to some education services, and get and find some entrepreneurship, some job opportunities. This is very critical. Another very typical situation is a settlement that starts on a provisory, on a transitory basis, and this is very common also in urban settings, especially in the Global South, and they become permanent, right? If we start from the beginning thinking the long term, thinking about the territory and the needs of the territory, and how the territory, through connection, through integration, through the combination of a social and physical infrastructure can support these communities, if we bring that up front, then we will avoid situations of continuous and permanent precariousness. So I think these two aspects are critical in our work. First, knowing the context and being able to deep work with the issues in the territory and with the key stakeholders. And secondly, having the long-term vision. What can happen if these communities stay here for a longer term? So let's start planning from the beginning. I will stop now.
Thank you so much, and I think that was really an important and excellent start to the framing. Very much agree with your point that yes, we can have the language of the HDP nexus, but in reality, I think what we all hear from communities and crises around the world, that people want to get on with their lives. They want to have dignity, they want to have hopes, they want to have jobs, their children in school, access to health care, community cohesion, whatever it is that might be. And I think that's really, really important that we think through as we start this discussion. Also the perspective that you highlighted on starting with that long-term perspective, that long-term vision. And
وإذا نحن نسعى لدعم كل هذه الجهود، وأعتقد أن هذا مسار جيد. للمتحدث التالي السيد فيصل خطان، المتحدث الثاني. أتيحت لنا الفرصة لمشاهدة التوقيع بين الجهتين لشؤون الصومال، وتحديدا هذا المشروع قد ركز على دور السلامة في تطبيق مبادئ التنمية الإنسانية في المشاريع التالية، وترجمة ذلك إلى الهدف أو الغاية الأسمى في هذه المشاريع. إذا كان بإمكانك أن تتشارك معنا بعض أفكاركم، كيف تقومون بذلك وكيف تقومون بتطبيق هذه المبادئ على المشاريع تطبق على المستوى المجتمعي؟
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. First of all, I would like to thank King Salman Center for allowing the chance for the Saudi Fund for Development to be part of this important session, especially for the time being and what's happening around the globe with the developments that's happening. It's very important to integrate such an axis. Humanitarian development nexus is very vital nowadays. Let me just give you the basic principles of that nexus. Integrating the principles of humanitarian development peace nexus into projects requires a close coordinated approach that ensures humanitarian aid, long-term development, and peace-building efforts reinforce each other. And at SFD, we are integrating through different fronts. First, aligning strategies and coordination. And that is through joint planning to bring together humanitarian development and peace actors to design projects with a shared vision. Multi-stakeholders partnerships, including collaboration with governments, NGOs, and international organizations to create synergies that enhance the effectiveness of our interventions. Additionally, a conflict-sensitive approach is crucial, requiring a thorough risk assessment to ensure that interventions do not exacerbate conflicts. And the agreement we just signed today with UNDP is a good example of that. Second, implementing adaptive and integrated programming to integrate humanitarian relief with development components. Projects shall provide emergency aid while simultaneously investing in livelihood programs, infrastructure, and economic empowerment initiatives. Building local capacities is equally important. Training local institutions and communities enables them to take ownership of development and peace efforts. Long-term sustainability should be a priority, ensuring the project transition smoothly from immediate relief to recovery and long-term stability. To give you an example of that, we collaborated with our partners at the UNHCR in the voluntary repatriation project for Afghan refugees to make sure that our intervention is adaptive and integrated. Third, using data-driven decision-making. Effective implementation of HDP Nexus requires robust conflict and risk analysis to understand a socio-political context before launching projects. Monitoring and evaluating shall be data-driven, allowing for dynamic strategy adjustments and ensuring that interventions have meaningful impact across all three pillars: humanitarian development and peace. Last but not least, ensuring flexible and sustainable financing. blended funding model that combine humanitarian grants with development financing help maintaining project continuity. Additionally, long-term synergies should go beyond immediate needs. Funding critical infrastructure, education, and economic opportunities that reduce dependency on aid, that is what we seek to do at SFD. To conclude, the Saudi Fund for Development integrates the principles of humanitarian development peace nexus into its projects by fostering collaboration with international organizations and focusing on sustainable development in fragile and conflict-affected regions. By partnering with entities such as Case Relief and UN agencies, SFD aim to address immediate humanitarian needs while promoting long-term development and peace-building efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for sharing, I think, what are very, very insightful insights in terms of the decision-making, but also the approach, taking into account those principles. And I noted that already one of the first principles was that importance of the three pillars, the humanitarian development and peace nexus, also the importance of joint and coordinated planning, and you also referred to the importance of local capacities and local actors, in addition to many other, I think, really important and critical principles. And I think this brings us to also a nice transition to Ambassador Poyana from the UN University of Peace. As we've been hearing, often there's an emphasis on the humanitarian aspects or the development aspects, and peace sometimes in these contexts can feel elusive, but we know that as part of a humanitarian development peace approach and reality, not just theory, it's absolutely vital that we bring in the peace-building component. So from your perspective, how do you see peace-building efforts at the community level? And how do those peace-building efforts at the community level, how can they really address some of those fundamental challenges that communities are facing, like a breakdown in social cohesion, for example, or a breakdown or very serious concerns around social protection, especially for the most vulnerable. And then perhaps even taking a step further, that lens of preventing conflict, especially where it's cyclical, and instead really having that turn of direction towards more sustainability and peace. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Since my first time I take the floor, I would like to show my deepest gratitude to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and also King Salman Center for inviting the University for Peace to take part on this important humanitarian forum. Let me start with a personal history. I attended 6 years ago the second International Humanitarian Forum in Riyadh. It was not in the agenda, the Peace Nexus. Later, I participated 2 years ago in the third forum in Riyadh, and in the recommendations of the final conference, it was included the importance of the peace nexus, the development peace nexus. And today, I would like then to show that you make it. You make it, and I want really to thank the leadership of King Salman Center and UNDP for the courage, for the vision, for organizing this important panel discussion. But why now? I think in these times of global threats, global crisis, unresolved conflicts, which is causing an unprecedented number of displaced and forced people, it's necessary then to work together, the peace, development, humanitarian actors. We are losing opportunities. This is a real platform to find ways, to find common synergies, to go together in this direction. I would like then to give you one example. For instance, this division about the different actors, the humanitarian, peace, security, and peace actors are not in the local level. When we talk with them, we see that they have a more cohesion approach, a more holistic approach to the work. The Global Compact on Refugees recognize that sustaining peace is a prerequisite to tackle the challenge of the enforced displaced people. I would like then to give you an important recommendation adopted in 2021 in the high-level official meeting at the level of ministers, and they discussed about the importance to work more on the deep causes of conflict. It's in this sense that we have some examples, the multi-stakeholder pledge on peace building and conflict prevention, led by Egypt, Norway, Colombia, and also the UN Peace Building Department. This is a good example, but as I said before, it's important and is recognized by the Global Compact on Refugees, the role played by the local community, and also these organizations led by parliamentarians, women, faith leaders, academia, because they are part of the solution to this important challenge that we have today, the solution for the stateless and enforced displaced people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I think that focus, especially on challenges at the community level where there is forced displacement, and some of these global efforts to find solutions for this. As you've said also, I think the partnership element where you've expanded, it's the parliamentarians, it's the women's organizations, youth organizations, all of these are critical. And thank you for highlighting both the forced displacement, but that wider set of partners. And I would move now to Mr. Quiller. We know even from the opening remarks that we heard, it's a very, very challenging time. We know that the crises are increasing in terms of number and complexity, in terms of scale, perhaps protractedness, at the same time that we also know that ODA is also shrinking. And there's a lot of funding challenges. We also know that Germany has been such an important partner on issues around recovery, resilience, and stabilization, and really thinking through what are some of these issues around innovative finance, again, not just from a theoretical or on paper perspective, but how do you actually translate this into support actually to countries that are experiencing the crisis, but also the need for HDP nexus approaches. If you can share with us from your perspective, how can innovative funding mechanisms, for example, the one in Germany from NFFF, how can it sustainably, but also importantly safely, reduce humanitarian needs, but also seek simultaneously also to address the root causes of protracted crises?
Thank you very much, Sarah, for this question. For us, the starting point is actually the average duration of a humanitarian crisis is now 10 years. And we know that humanitarian actors alone cannot solve the situation, let alone the underlying causes. So we really need to make the nexus work. We have been talking for far too long about making the nexus work, and we are really grateful to KS Relief for putting the topic of the HDP nexus so prominently on the agenda today. So we are convinced that a functioning HDP nexus starts with a joint analysis from actors on the ground. It needs joint planning, joint programming, and it needs joint financing. And the financing part is important. And that's why I want to quickly introduce the Nexus Funding Facility as an instrument that we developed jointly with UNDP. The situation in the Lake Chad Basin has always been a focus of our humanitarian assistance, stabilization, and development efforts, because there you have a compounded crisis that sees the terrorist threat from Boko Haram. You saw large-scale displacement, protected humanitarian crisis, and you see also the effects of climate change very clearly. So as a consequence, we developed together with UNDP the Nexus Funding Facility specifically for the Lake Chad Basin in the first place, a multi-donor fund that drives integrated HDP operational approaches while providing quality funding to local and to national actors. So the Nexus Funding Facility was developed in a consultative process with the RCHC system, with national governments, which is very important, with international organizations, but what is even more important, also with local actors and with NGOs. So we took all their ideas into account. It was borne out clearly, as you already alluded to, Sarah, to the need for more integrated humanitarian development and peace approaches, and of course, and this is the important point, of more and better quality funding. So the fund will fund consortia, or the facility will fund consortia with joint projects, and it will thereby encourage the actors to sit together and do joint planning, joint programming and implementation along the nexus. So what's different to other funding instruments? First, the NFF is not bound to one sector only. It comprises all aspects of the nexus. Second is providing dedicated, flexible funding directly to NGOs also, but also to international actors. And third, its allocation strategies will be locally consulted, this is very important, and developed in an inclusive process across operational silos. So we thereby hope to overcome fragmented funding and coordination approaches and to truly realize the nexus. We believe it has great potential. The funding facility was presented at the Lake Chad Basin Governors Forum at the beginning of this month, together with our colleagues from UNDP. Now we need the full support from donors, operational organizations and coordination entities in order to really show that it can work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience. And as you said, it really is innovative, and it's often one of the challenges. I think it was said earlier that we often talk about the HDP nexus, but how do we move it forward? And part of the call for doing so more effectively is a coordinated approach, a multi-sectoral approach, but also a flexible approach, and one that brings together financing in a way that is not fragmented. And I think that experience that you shared with the NFF for the Lake Chad region, I think very much encapsulates even the way you developed the formation of it in consultation with the RCHC, with the national government, but with also the local actors. So I think for the next time such a panel is convened, also some of the lessons learned coming out, I think we'll also see that with those kind of flexible, innovative approaches on financing, that we can move the needle in terms of that joined up implementation on the ground and serving the communities. So thank you. I would like now to go to Mr. Andrew Saberton from UNFPA. In the HDP Nexus discussions, but very much across, whether it's from a lens of peace, development, and humanitarian, and of course the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, a concern about leaving no one behind. And how do we actually do that in these very, very complex crisis and conflict contexts, but also how do we ensure that in the recovery process, in bringing together that humanitarian development and peace lens, we are not unintentionally leaving out the very critical voice, participation, role, whether it's of women, of youth, girls, really into that post-conflict setting. And if you can share with us some reflections on how does UNFPA support the empowerment of women, girls, and youth in these post-conflict settings, while also bringing it into, again, that longer-term vision, again, that synergy between the HDP nexus with a view ultimately for resilience and stability.
Thank you, Sarah, for the question. Conflicts, climate disasters, and other crises have intensified. Everybody in this room and everybody in the forum realizes that. What everyone should also realize is that women and girls caught up in such crises and emergencies are uniquely impacted. When crises hit, their access to reproductive health and protection services is often restricted, and that restriction often brings quite catastrophic consequences. They can't get access to a hospital to give birth. Indeed, the majority of maternal deaths, that's around 60% of the global total, or actually more than 500 maternal deaths a day, occur in fragile and humanitarian settings. These deaths are largely preventable with access to skilled care. Those deaths occur at the moment, which should be one of the happiest points of anybody's life in giving birth, it is replaced with tragedy. We estimate that 11 million pregnant women will need access to humanitarian aid and reproductive health services this year. Furthermore, as support systems break down, women and girls' vulnerability to all forms of violence increases. 70%, I will repeat that number, 70% of women experience gender-based violence during a humanitarian crisis. That's compared to 35% worldwide. Yet survivors of that violence are often left without access to life-saving medical and psychosocial support services. Indeed, an estimated, a staggering 92 million people will need access to protection services this year. Time and time and time and time again, women and girls are bearing the brunt of crisis and conflict. And yet, in this darkness, UNFPA is attempting to bring some light. In this darkness, UNFPA is bringing light. During emergencies and conflicts, UNFPA is among the first on the ground. We're usually the first on the ground because we're already there before the conflict strikes. And we're there to ensure that women and girls can access the life-saving services that help guarantee that pregnancy and childbirth do not become deadly threats, but are enabled safer. In 2024, around 825,000 women were assisted to give birth safely in such settings. Working with our partners, we ensure that women and girls, including those who have survived gender-based violence, can access medical and psychosocial support. In 2024, we supported 1,600 safe spaces in 49 countries, ensuring over 3.9 million people could access protection services. Coming back more directly to the question around the nexus, and in the context that we know as crises are growing, at the same time, funds are dwindling. UNFPA is focused on working across the humanitarian development peace nexus, and we're linking short-term humanitarian assistance with efforts that address the root causes of crisis and which support longer-term well-being, peace and stability. Our efforts focus on building resilience through strengthening the ability of the individual, the community and systems to anticipate, mitigate and withstand shocks. UNFPA is continually investing in stronger, more resilient health systems and local leadership and capacities. A very significant intervention that UNFPA does is in the training of midwives. And training of midwives and ensuring through that training of midwives and that capacity building, the continuity and quality of care extends beyond crises. Last year, UNFPA supported 3,500 health facilities with staff and supplies. And we support the rehabilitation of health infrastructure, the strengthening of supply chains, and delivering sustainable solutions. A very specific example was in Sudan in 2024, UNFPA installed 19 solar power systems at emergency obstetric care and health facilities across the country, ensuring that operating rooms, blood bank refrigerators, and incubators could continue to operate 24/7 in the absence of electricity. We understand that the peace and stability are inextricably linked to gender equality, youth inclusion, and ensuring equitable access to essential services for all. Our work is rooted in the belief that empowering women, girls, and youth is key to building resilient societies in post-conflict settings. And by focusing on their rights, health, and participation in decision-making processes, the organization is helped lay the foundation for sustainable peace and development. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much. Again, a number of very important points coming through. I think one that you highlighted that we also heard in the opening remarks, that in these contexts where there's crisis, development actors typically have a long decade of history and experience and presence working in those countries, working in those communities, working with those partners. and that vital role transitioning that to crisis, understanding or being able to address and contribute to discussions around the root causes. Again, that long-term perspective is very key. But also these important elements that we have not so much brought to the surface yet, but issues around the psychosocial, issues around the mental health and well-being, protection, gender-based violence, and a full suite of issues. So thank you also for bringing those as part of the conversation. I would like to take us to a round two, some follow-up discussions. And I think in the background of these discussions, I was very struck by some reflections that many of you made. First, again, I think that appreciation, it was interesting, Ambassador, I wasn't aware that in the previous sessions where it was mentioned, humanitarian development, peace nexus, it was not as forefront as we are today, really getting into a discussion, really getting into the content. And I think that does demonstrate increasingly the recognition. And again, our thanks to the KS Relief Partners for organizing us and bringing us together, really that recognition that we need to do more. And it's not just enough to talk about the HDP nexus, but we have to translate those partnerships into reality, those financing elements, those different approaches. So the second round, I would like us to think, what can we do? How can we take this going forward in a more robust way that really impacts for the benefit those communities that we're serving? And I'll start again with Ms. Rosbach from UN Habitat. We've heard also a lot about the importance of partnerships. So partnerships within the UN, partnerships with international partners, also with local actors, with national governments, CSOs, and private sector. But if you could help us understand, how does UN Habitat, how do you see the collaboration with other UN agencies in this context, as well as local organizations, to really be able to take forward the HDP nexus in a way that's actually impactful and meaningful, actually on the ground? So some examples would be very welcome.
Yeah, sure. I do think there's no other way around to start with, right? And I believe what David shared actually reflects how this discussion has been evolving, and how this conference is critical and important for us to stop a little bit, breathe, and think and reflect, right, about the world we are living in, and how we can better add some value from the different standpoints we are. I believe one instrumental mechanism is to really have a strong narrative and a strong agenda of work, where this kind of division of labor is more clear. Maybe I can give an example. We're just launching a framework of solutions for internal displaced populations that we supported, and we worked together many UN agencies. And if you look at this framework, you're going to see, what we call the human settlements approach, and how we bring all these elements that I was talking about in my first intervention, right? How to look at the settlement, how to look at the territory with a little bit of longer-term vision, and really work, with the local stakeholders. And I'm glad you mentioned the NGOs and the importance of local stakeholders. And here, from UN Habitat, we have a spontaneous flow and line of work with local governments, for example, that for me are key stakeholders in the recovery process. For example, in the past, we have worked in Gaza, helping people to rebuild their houses, but together with local authorities. Right now, we have been working also in Syria. We have been there all the time, working with local authorities, joining forces also with UNDP. For example, we can, from our different perspectives, speed up, for example, the provision of services, help these organizations, the local suppliers, the local authorities, to profile damages, to identify needs, physical needs, physical infrastructure, but also social needs, right? And help these authorities, for example, to work on these needs. And the different agencies, they have different expertise, right? So while UNCHR, for example, has the expertise to work on refugees, we can add value, bringing a kind of different approach. working with, as I said, the local providers to connect services, or working with the population, with the communities to identify where opportunities are for accessing education, health, and everything, and promoting this integration. UNDP is strong in building institutions and strengthen local economic development, for example. We can come in with urban planning. And there are practical tools. UN Habitat has many tools. We have been working in this fragile context or overall at UN Habitat. So I could make a shopping list right now, urban planning tools, the city profiles, where we identify not only the damages, but also the opportunities, strong methodologies to map land and to work with communities on property rights, right? Map, identify, assess, implement. This is especially important for refugees when they come back to their countries, because land, we know, is often a subject of conflict, right? And if we have these assets, for example, in Syria, we have a full mapping that we did with people living outside of the country. Now they're coming back, and these mechanisms are going to be useful. So, as I said before, our long-term presence in several countries can help us and add some resources to the emergency response, to the humanitarian response, and mostly important, go beyond the emergency and really engage and convene, establish maybe solid long-term governance mechanisms where participation is a critical aspect, and helping stakeholders to see beyond the crisis. I think this is the greatest value added from UN Habitat, and how best we can work in partnership with several agencies.
Great, thank you. And I think those are very, very real examples that you shared, also the tools. And I can say from my perspective, I've had the opportunity to collaborate with UN Habitat using those tools in many different contexts. And what we see is often it's some of the most challenging issues, right? As you mentioned, housing, land and property rights is an example. So it's part of perhaps a humanitarian. If it's linked to shelter, it's definitely linked to the recovery. And I would say often, in many cases, it's often linked to peace. Do people have the right to go back to their homes in different contexts as IDPs or otherwise? So I think this is very important, as also the point that you really emphasized on the role of local actors. So we've been discussing about civil society organizations. We've discussed a bit less on the private sector, but certainly the role on local authorities, municipal developments, and how can that be then also connected to some of the national processes in terms of response, but also reform. So I think it's, you've given us a lot to think of on how do we translate this really to the practical application on the ground. And again, I think a very excellent transition over to Your Excellency. You shared with us at the outset, the principles that SFD approaches in terms of thinking through what is really the HDP nexus on the ground. If you can take that one step further and share with us what you would see as an example or examples or lessons learned where, from your perspective, the HDP nexus principles have actually been translated into reality and really effectively implemented. What was the result, but also what really, from your perspective, what were the factors that really contributed to that success of translating the principles to impact, positive impact on the ground? Over to you, Your Excellency.
Well, fortunately, the number of examples is quite high. But, since we are hosted by King Salman Center, I'll pick an example that was a success in Jordan. Let me first highlight our contribution to the government of Jordan since 1978. Just to give you a glimpses of our engagement with the government of Jordan for a long time, and then I will get into the example itself. We've extended we've financed more than 40 projects that are worth more than $2 billion US. The majority of those projects are on a grant base, around $1.5 billion US on a grant base. So the mandate of SFD is extending concessional lending. But if you see our engagement with Jordan is more into grant financing. Basically, we need to ask a question here. Why do we need to apply HDP Nexus in Jordan in particular? Due to the high number of refugees. If you count, you will find that 1 in 15 people is a refugee in Jordan. That's the highest number per capita in the whole world. High level of unemployment, about 22% of unemployment rate. And that's due to the slow growth, low quality job opportunities, limited active labor market policies, and the high migrant population, which reaches around 30%. As a result, the government is facing growing fiscal pressure. And third, the economic fiscal pressure risks destabilizing Jordan. Jordan ranked the 4th on the Peace Index among the Arab states and the 62nd globally. While relatively peaceful development and humanitarian challenges are significant enough that could create instability if left unattended. Regarding the engagement itself, so it has two fronts, the humanitarian and developmental. The humanitarian front, that was an engagement with UN agency. It was with the WFP, where we extended $6 million to provide support for more than 500,000 refugees. And also there was a joint effort of SFD with UNHCR to fund and equip and maintain Azraq camp and provide shelters to refugees. The second on the developmental front, where we connected Azraq camp to clean energy, connected 54,000 refugees and 10,000 households with access to renewable energy in Azraq camp. We also provided supplies, supplying clean energy to marketplaces and other public communal locations, enabling refugees to access economic opportunities. We found that Azraq Camp project contributed in decreasing pressure and basic infrastructure services caused by the significant number of Syrian refugees. In addition to that, it supports the economic situation by increasing job opportunities and improving empowerment prospects in the country. More importantly, the experience highlights that the need to create a bridge between humanitarian response and economic opportunities for refugees and internally displaced people to outlook the human potential for development. Finally, all of these interventions have contributed to the SDGs and Jordan's national development plans. And regarding the factors, the key factors of the success is the clear and shared visions, the need-driven project design, and finally, the continuous and close coordination. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, and a very, very concrete example, which I think really helps us to envisage how this translates very much to a country, but even to a community level. So thank you for sharing that. And I would like to use that as a basis, perhaps, to frame the next question to Ambassador Poyana. We've been discussing quite a bit, I think, of the HDP nexus in the context of, let's say, a crisis within a community or even within a country. Excuse me as I lose my voice. But as we know, conflicts are also often cross-border. They're regional. They also have, I think, devastating impacts, also connecting to also regional and to global peace. So if you can share with us, taking it a bit further, from your perspective, what can really be used to scale up that community-based peace-building efforts from a perspective of a cross-border or even a regional initiative where the situation requires that? And really, what are the main challenges? Like, what do you experience as some of the challenges or obstacles on the one side, but also those opportunities and those efforts in terms of how those can also then contribute to global peace efforts? Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me be clear. We are not here inventing the wheel. The relation between development, peace, and security this is not new. This was established in 1945 when the UN was established. The main objective of the UN is to prevent the succeeding generation from the score of war. And the relation between the nations are interrelated and mutually reinforcing. And then what we are doing here is making a call about the importance of multilateralism, the importance of more coordination among the UN entities, and to be more pragmatic and action-oriented. Saying that, the University for Peace received mandate from the General Assembly some months ago from more than 138 countries to approach to the notion of security from a different perspective or innovative perspective through the research, training, education. And this is what we are trying to do, humbly, only to complement the great efforts by UN Habitat, by Saudi Fund, by Germany, by UNFPA, complementing. In that context, I would like then to refer again to the importance of the Global Compact on Refugees, refer to the notion of partnerships. This is an opportunity then to recall SDG 17 about partnerships. We cannot do anything alone. We need to partner with the other to promote these ideas of peace, to promote human rights and fundamental freedoms. It's in that context that UPIS signed an agreement of cooperation with UNHCR. In that context, on this agreement, it's a crucial opportunity to demonstrate how inclusive local solutions can contribute to peace building, how contribute to peaceful coexistence. It's in this regard that we start a process of consultation with local civil society and UN entities in Europe, for the European region in UN Geneva, for Africa in Nouakchott, Mauritania, together with the African Peace Conference. And we are going to extend this different consultation in all the regions, and we are going to present the conclusions of these good practices in December this year in the high-level official meeting. This is an humble example that we are working together with the local communities and to bring them, to give them a voice to the international community about the importance of local solutions. Another initiative that I would like to applaud is the leadership of the Kingdom of Bahrain. In particular, the King Hamad Center for Peaceful Coexistence, together with other partners, UPIS and Joya Higher Education from Malta. They established a first ever peaceful coexistence diploma in which high-level officials of the UN, civil society, diplomats are studying together the different aspects of peaceful coexistence. And also, to end my short intervention, I would like also to bring to this floor the importance of good offices. It was approved recently, the so-called the Pact of the Future and the new Agenda for Peace. Again, it's a call about the importance of the use of peaceful ways of settlement, and one of them is the good offices, and to bring these aspects on peace building to the local communities, as this is what we are doing, using the good offices in conflicts like in Myanmar, Israel and Palestine, in the field of also in the Sahel, in Ukraine, in Colombia, in many places. And then it's important then to bring these aspects to the local communities, but as I say at the beginning, this is not a way then to invent the wheel. This is UN. United Nations is a peace project that it's not only a dream, it's a reality, and all of us, we have the responsibility and we don't have the luxury to forget the big commitment of our grandfathers in the pursuit of peace and security. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Ambassador. I think we're increasingly hearing also a strong theme, of course, on the issues around the partnerships, but I think really that strong engagement of local actors, and I think also national actors. And as we move to Mr. Kohler, I think it was mentioned at the outset that there's a lot of discussions on what the HDP nexus is, but we just need to get on with it, right? Because we know that this is the approach that communities and countries need. We know from seeing time and time again that humanitarian assistance alone is not enough to bridge towards recovery, towards development, and towards peace. And we've heard already some examples of how this is translated in different contexts. But if you can share with us, from your perspective, what best practices would you really highlight for improved approaches and really improved coordination for the HDP nexus?
No, thank you very much, Sarah, for that question. I guess as everyone in the room here probably we share the concern about the current financial constraints and challenges for the humanitarian system. And this might be the start of a new normal, so we have to face it, we have to deal with it. So there are basically three solutions from our point of view. First one, of course, the system has to become more efficient, which is more easily said than done, which is basically about a very strict prioritization of life-saving needs. The second thing is you need to become innovative, even more innovative, to tap new resources. And the third thing is you need to take the burden, as you said, from the humanitarian system. You can do this by increasing stabilization and peace efforts, but also resilience. And there, again, you are at the nexus. So Germany is a big supporter of nexus approaches in the UN system. I've already mentioned the Nexus Funding Facility as a concrete example, but let me give you very quickly a few other examples. Germany is also a great supporter of UNHCR's new Sustainable Responses Initiative, which, as David has already mentioned several times, is based on the Global Compact for Refugees, where Germany is also heavily invested. And the starting point for this new Sustainable Responses Initiative is basically the recognition that the vast majority of displacement crises have been going on for decades. And the trick is really to include people into systems of education, in health. In September last year, I was visiting the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya, and I could see how UNHCR was working together with the local government and with the government of Kenya. And this is something actually that gives us hope. So Germany is a strong supporter of Sustainable Responses Initiative. The third example, just very quickly, is the Durable Solutions Fund that has been established by Robert Piper, and where our Ministry for Development Cooperation has contributed financial means. But also at the capitals level, it's important that we coordinate, and our Ministry for Development Coordination and my Ministry for Foreign Affairs, which is responsible for humanitarian assistance, they developed something that's called the Nexus Chapeau. And the Nexus Chapeau is encouraging our partners, in particular NGOs, to come together in consortia and to develop joint proposals across the Nexus that can be funded then jointly by our Ministry for Development Coordination and by the Ministry for Foreign Affairs. And fourth, we see the critical role of the RCHC system, especially the resident coordinators. That's why we seconded through our Center for International Peace Operations Nexus advisors into the RCOs, in the RC offices, in order to increase the capacity of the resident coordinators in order to do this job. We also need OCHA. They are already working very closely together in coordinating with the RCHC system, but you also need the development part of the coordination side on board, which is the Development Cooperation Office. So it's very important that the two parts of the system get closer together and add to this the stabilization efforts, and then you probably have a good nexus. You can even go beyond that and talk about increased donor coordination at capitals level, Geneva, New York, and the field level. In essence, there is basically no way around making the nexus work because, as I said in the beginning, the humanitarian system is facing unprecedented challenges. So let's make this work together as a call for action. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a very powerful call to action, that there's no way that we cannot make this work. It must work, I think, on the HDP nexus. And I think the many different examples that you show really emphasize that the intensity of the coordination that needs to be there for the HDP Nexus to come together, the aspects of the partnership, but also really addressing different elements. So, for example, you mentioned the forced displacement issue. Something that we often see in some of these contexts is really the need to address some of the social but also the economic aspects. So, for example, how to make sure people have access to a job, access to an income, and how is that also brought into these coordinated approaches. So thank you very much. I think you've given us a lot to think about, and as you said, for that efficiency and that coordination that's really needed for these effective resilience and HDP approaches. I would like now to turn to Mr. Saberton, and the question is a bit similar to what I asked our UN Habitat colleague at the outset, but I think it really, in a way, brings together the importance of this, that spirit of cooperation, collaboration, and coordination. And if you can also share with us UNFPA's examples, your perspectives on what would you see really as successful collaborations with other organizations, or perhaps also other sectors. You mentioned also very importantly that multi-sectoral approach in your interventions that you feel have positively enhanced UNFPA's work within the HDP Nexus, and any lessons that you would share coming out of those highlights of experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'll take the first part of the question first, regarding the examples of successful collaboration of enhanced UNFPA's work. Most importantly, or very importantly, local actors, particularly women and youth-led organisations, are critical partners in delivering responses that are community-driven. Such partners have unique knowledge of the local context and complexities, and they are adept at working across the humanitarian development peace nexus. They can access affected people more easily, including those at risk of being left behind, such as displaced populations. For example, in the Sahel, UNFPA is working with local partners to address gender-based violence and promote the leadership of women and youth in peace building. This is included in establishing women and girls safe spaces that offer specialised GBV and reproductive health services, as well as leadership and training. The safe spaces also provide platforms for dialogue where women and youth can come together to discuss the challenges facing their communities and develop locally led solutions. It supports women and young people to play an active role in peace negotiations and local governance structures. I'd like to turn for a minute to the subject of child marriage. This we know is a negative coping strategy, and we see increases in child marriages in humanitarian contexts. Indeed, despite a steady decline in child marriage in the last decade, multiple crises, including conflict, climate shocks and displacement, are threatening to reverse the hard-earned gains, heightening protection risks for girls. 12 million girls under the age of 18 are married annually. UNFPA recognises the impacts of megatrends and works with top-down and bottom-up approaches, ensuring strategies integrate climate resilience, access to education and life skills training. As an example, since the inception of the global programme to end child marriage, UNFPA, working with UNICEF, have reached more than 20 million girls with life skills and comprehensive sexuality education. We have supported nearly 3 million girls to enrol in, return to, or remain in school. And we have partnered with more than 66 million community members, including local actors, grassroots and religious and traditional leaders, to challenge discriminatory gender norms that perpetuate violence. UNFPA has played an instrumental role in shaping the youth, peace and security agenda, and building on its programmatic experience of engaging women and young people in conflict and post-conflict context to inform policies and programs that recognise the positive role of young people in preventing conflict and building sustainable peace. With our partners, and importantly youth representatives themselves, We have significantly strengthened advocacy for the youth, peace and security agenda in the Arab region, collaborating with the League of Arab States to develop and launch the landmark Regional Arab Youth Peace and Security Strategy. That strategy is a crucial step towards empowering Arab youth and ensuring their meaningful participation in building peaceful and secure societies. Since the launch of the strategy, we have supported Jordan, Somalia, Libya, Lebanon, Iraq and Egypt in their national action plans development. We will continue to emphasize joint programming and partnerships, including with authorities, humanitarian and development agencies, and civil service organizations. And again, I must emphasize, particularly with women and youth-led organizations. This is what makes aid delivery more effective, more efficient, and sustainable. UNFPA is also committed to reaching the target of providing 43% of its humanitarian funding to such local actors by 2025. Last year, just under 40% of that funding was channeled through this route and through local and national partners. Here today, I wish to express gratitude to KS Relief for convening this forum, providing a platform to build on and strengthen collective efforts and enhance the generation of knowledge and expertise in the humanitarian field, its applications, and the complementarity between humanitarian, development and peace efforts in any one crisis or a context. And Sarah, if I might just take 1 minute to return to the second part of your question, just 1 minute, which is the lessons learned. And I've got 3 points. One, we need to pay attention to the streamlining of the funding and implementation processes to ensure coordinated, efficient and effective programs. Two, we need to work across sectors and avoid silo approaches, and we need to ensure a cost-efficient and cost-effective use of those resources that we get. And thirdly, and very important, and my earlier part of the answer dealt with this, partnerships are critical and the key. With humanitarian and development actors, communities, and women and young people, programs must be locally led and owned with the engagement of all the stakeholders. This means ensuring that the people we serve, especially women and girls, are meaningfully consulted and active through the program design through to its evaluation. It is imperative they have a say in the decisions that affect their life. When I say that they are represented, Sarah, I don't just mean that they should have a seat at the table. I don't just mean that they must be heard. I mean that men and boys must listen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Soberton, and I think that's an excellent point where we begin to wrap up this very, very, to me, very important, but I think also very insightful panel. I think it's impossible to sum up all of the specific, very, very key points that you brought into the discussion, and I'm very grateful that we will have the closing remarks from Ms. Khafa Al-Shalan, who is the KS Relief's International Partnerships Supervisor, to conclude. But before I do that, first I would like to, again, really thank our partners at KS Relief for creating the space to dedicate the time during this International Humanitarian Forum so that we could focus on the humanitarian development peace nexus, not as a concept, not as a theory, not as an acronym that we use lightly in documents, but really, really that it has meaningful impact on the communities and the countries that we serve. And I think across this past 90 minutes, the examples that we've heard are all very tangible, the lessons learned. And I think just a few highlights. One is that there is no alternative to the humanitarian development peace nexus. And I think from each of your examples, from each of your framing, I think that point came time and time again. But we also heard that the partnership is essential, the coordination is essential, the ability to work flexibly and really engaging and serving the communities that are part of really the essence of the humanitarian peace nexus that really is also very, very much at the heart of it. So I would like to thank again our co-organizers, the KS Relief. I would also like to thank each of the panelists for sharing your insights, your lessons learned, your knowledge, your ideas and your perspectives. And I would ask the audience that we share a round of applause for all of the excellent insights that you shared with us today. Thank you. And we will now hear the closing from Ms. Khafa Al-Shalan. I think we're supposed to have the closing. Yeah.
شكرا جزيلا. آسفين على اللخبطة. السلام عليكم جميعا. Excellency, distinguished panelists, esteemed guests. As we bring this high-level session to a close, on behalf of KS Relief, I wish to extend my deepest gratitude to everyone here for their insightful contributions and unwavering support to advancing the humanitarian development peace nexus. These discussions reflect not only the urgency of the multi-dimensional crises we confront, but also our shared desire for a more integrated, collaborative, and sustainable approach to crisis response and recovery. The evolving landscape of international cooperation presents now new opportunities and considerations for the emerging actors. Recognizing the HDP nexus as a critical framework for tackling the interconnected challenges of fragility, protected crises, climate disasters, and socio-economic shocks, KS Relief has been committed to support since its endorsement in 2016, and this is for Dr. David, just to assure you that KS Relief is committed to this support. Now allow me to highlight the key milestones that have led us to this important moment. The Riyadh International Forum, as Dr. David has already mentioned, the Riyadh International Forum in 2020 made it its first theme centered on the humanitarian development nexus with a set of actionable recommendations that align with the UNG Resolution 72-279 in 2018 to strengthen humanitarian development peace collaboration. Following that, the Riyadh International Forum in 2023 recommended enhancing complementarity between humanitarian development peace-building actors. Notably, the focus shifted from policy to practical implementation and moving from advisory role to intervention design. This shift aligned with the recognition that sustainable development requires a conflict-sensitive and cohesive approach. Through their partnership, KS Relief and UNDP are advancing the HDP nexus and fostering development and resilience across the globe. In Yemen, in particular, I'm going to give a few examples of our partnership with UNDP. First, vocational and business skills training support projects. Through vocational, technical, and entrepreneurial skills training, KS Relief empowers vulnerable communities. In Yemen, over 11,000 individuals, many of the most marginalized population, gained valuable skills in areas like food processing and textiles. The program impact is significant. 87% of our graduates either established their own business or found employment in the private sector. Demonstrating that focused intervention can effectively break cycles of dependency and promote sustainable livelihoods. Second, empowering women through renewable energy. We are empowering women in KS Relief economically through groundbreaking initiative that has benefited approximately 21,000 women in Yemen and resulting in 375 new micro businesses. This positions women as key player in Yemen solar energy market, ensuring long-term sustainability for household and communities. Third, joint implementation program for social protection. In addition to livelihood support, KS Relief and UNDP are actively working to strengthen social cohesion and institutional resilience, targeting Yemen's most vulnerable populations, including displaced persons and marginalized groups, specifically by reinforcing local-owned and led peace-building initiatives and restoring livelihoods. The partnership is demonstrating that genuine recovery extends beyond mere survival and encompassing both stability and long-term growth. At the end, KS Relief is approaching its 10th year anniversary. So we are very proud of our contribution to the HDP Nexus. Through strong partnerships, we are dedicated to building collaborative platforms that facilitate knowledge exchange, strategic alignment, and measurable impact. Moving forward, we believe these shared insights will serve as a catalyst for stakeholders and partners to align their efforts, best practices, and co-develop innovative solutions that drive substantial progress towards the 2030 agenda. In closing, we reaffirm that the HDP Nexus is not merely a framework, but a transformative approach to humanitarian work. Together, we can build a future where crises are prevented, resilience is strengthened, and no one is left behind. Thank you, everyone.